Welcome back, or welcome to the Tiny Shifts podcast. I'm your host, Andy Nunn. Each week, I'm going to cover an idea on philosophy, mindset, magic, anything that I'm sort of curious about. And my hope is to sort of give you very small ideas that can sort of change the way you see the world. And welcome to the 4-part series called Wonderfully Uncomfortable. So in this series, I am breaking down my sort of mental process that I use to sort of work towards doing hard things. And I've used this process in many different areas of my life, from battling addiction to trying to conquer the 100-mile distance, or doing some of the ultra marathons that I've done and some of the adventures that I've done, or any sort of task that I'm working towards. This is something that I use in everyday life, and I hope you can get some value from this. Now, the first 2 parts so part 1 was about finding your why. So I broke down in this about how finding your values and tying your why to your values can really help you sort of align your goals with your sort of purpose and finding sort of meaning. Episode 2 was about setting goals. So this was about breaking down 5-year goals, 3 years, 1 year, 90 days, how you can do fear setting, and sort of combining these 2 sort of methods to break down the daily actions that can work towards your sort of long-term goal about who you want to be, the type of person you are. Episode 3. Now, this is what gets you through the middle, essentially. This is the messy part of striving for something that's quite difficult. This is the bit that doesn't make it to the Instagram reels. This is the bit that we don't get to see enough of, but it's something that we all universally sort of experience when we're sort of striving for doing things that are difficult, that gets out of our comfort zone. You know, we talk about them, but we don't really get to see them, or we don't really have the tools to sort of get us through it. And hopefully today I want to sort of give you some frameworks, give you some tools that I'm sort of going to work with, because I think it's important to understand with what I've spoken about in the first 2 episodes, which is the why, which can help you get started. And then the goal is like the sort of compass and the direction. But you need a sort of system that's going to help you when motivation disappears. Because motivation does disappear. There's going to be times where things get difficult. You know, everyone loves starting a difficult goal or challenge or something that's really, really hard. We love that sort of feeling. It gets us excited. Some of us even get addicted to that feeling of starting new things. If you're someone with ADHD like me, I get so excited and I jump into goals. I get hyper-focused on something. I'll spend like a whole 12 hours just coming up with this idea as if it's the greatest thing ever. And I'll come out and be like, and I'll just forget about it and just don't do it again. Because once I got to the point where I've lost that sort of excitement and that novelty of a new task, I sort of lose the motivation to do it, and I just give up on it. And a lot of these deserve to be, it's not a bad thing that I give up on some of these things, because some of them are ridiculous and they're just ideas that come to my mind. That's how I work. But if there's a real big goal, like something, I'm not talking about these things that you just have this light bulb moment. You're like, this would be great. I know what, I need an app, so I'll make it. And you create the app and then you never use it. Not those sort of things. I'm talking about these sort of personal goals that you're trying to strive for. So for instance, this 100-mile sort of thing a 100-mile distance that I'm trying to conquer. As I've previously mentioned, I have failed at this attempt a few times. It's been a difficult sort of process to sort of overcome and trying to get around that. So one thing that I want to explain today is, what do I do when things get difficult, when things are hard? When you're in this moment and you're just unable to do that. So I'm going to break this down. And that's essentially where I want to go with, because once you've got the goal set and reality turns up, you're tired, you're busy, the sort of doubt creeps in. The question that I want to help you with today is, what gets you through that? What gets you through that? that really hard moment where you're just struggling. Because we all experience them. I've been experiencing those, and recently with my training, I'm going to go into those. But hopefully in this episode, we're going to break that down. I'm going to give you some tools to sort of work through those moments and talk about just this messy bit in the middle that doesn't get enough attention in the sort of process. James Clear, Atomic Habits, he's the author of Atomic Habits. He says that we don't fall to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our system. So create the perfect system. But the problem is I find, we do try that. We create the system when our motivation's high. We have our trainers next to the door. We do all our journaling. We have the morning routine set. We do all these things. But there's a point where it doesn't work. The system just fails us. And it's because it's not just a systems problem. It's a human problem. Before systems, we have mindset. Before action, we have the stories that we tell ourselves. And before any habit formation that you have in your life, you have this sort of gap, which is this space between stimulus and response. And if you can't control what happens in that gap, you're never going to be able to sort of do anything. No system's ever going to save you. I'm sorry to tell you that. So what I want to get into today is about this space and this gap that we can sort of work on. Because in this gap is the stories we tell ourselves, the fears that we have, our biases, everything like this. So once you learn to sort of control that and understand it and understand your thinking and compassion and thinking about your thinking, you can then stop responding by default. You can choose on purpose, and more importantly, you can decide who you're going to be. And this is a part of metacognition. This is about thinking about your thinking. This is about striving for excellence and being able to adjust in the moment. And if you really want to work towards your goals and you want to get better at, trying to just take action, you want to become someone who's a person of action rather than or works towards hard things or gets out your comfort zone. But not only you're looking for this short-term intensity, you remember that long-term consistency. You're a person who focuses on long-term consistency because that trumps short-term intensity. Okay, it's so important. In this sort of process, we're not looking for, these bursts of energy. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of people that just want to run a marathon and want to tick the box. I'm not talking about that. Okay, I'm not talking about that type of person or that type of behavior. I think if you really want this, find the meaning and find value in what you're doing, and this is about changing the person you are and feeling better and feeling like you have satisfaction in your life and that self-actualization. It's not about these short one-day bursts of excitement and joy. Obviously, these moments matter. Like if you want to run a marathon, just go and run it. Yeah, great. But what the sort of goals that I'm talking about today are these goals that are about self-actualization. If I've spoken about it before, about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's about once we have all the other parts set up, at the top is like that purpose section. And purpose isn't about just doing a marathon or just doing one-off events, doing skydiving, which are great things to have. Purpose are things like, who are you? What defines you? That's what purpose is. What type of person are you? And that's the goals that I want to work towards today. I'm a person who does hard things. I am somebody who bounces back. I don't look at outcomes as success. I look at who I show up every single day. When the going gets tough, when the exercise gets difficult, that's the sort of stuff that I want to be focusing on when I'm talking about this wonderfully uncomfortable. Okay? How do we become the type of person who has character? How do we build that character within us? So hopefully I can go into this section right now, and it's about this messy bit that's not very attractive. It's not the bit we want to share with the world, okay? Because it's not very nice. Often it feels terrible, this messy bit in the middle when we're trying to work towards something. Because I think the important thing is when you begin an event, when you begin something you're working towards, it's very emotional. You have motivation really high. So this is the bit we're going to start with right now. This is where motivation's really high. And then what happens is you get this boredom or doubt and you lose that sort of novelty, or fatigued, you're stressed, life gets in the way. And it's not the task itself. You already know it. You've already proven that you can do it. There's a mental back and forth that comes with yourself. This conversation that you're having inside of your head is preventing you sort of taking action. You start to rationalize that, I'll just avoid it today. So my personal angle from this is the last few months of training has been really hard for me. If I compare myself to last year, I could look at my training, it's like 15 hours and I won a couple of races and everything was going well. And then this year sometimes I'm looking in the mirror, I'm like 5 kilos heavier, I'm running half the distance, I'm trying to do the same goal. My expectations have to be lowered dramatically. And sometimes doubt can creep in. I had a couple of weeks ago where everything was feeling great. I ran like 100 kilometers, finished the week feeling strong. Then a week later, I remember being halfway through a run and it just been so hard. And I was just like, I just can't do it. How am I going to do this? And in my head, I start thinking, I'm only 15 kilometers into a training run. What am I going to do? How am I going to do 160 kilometers in one day? And those doubts start creeping in and they become like a mind virus if you don't sort of stop them and check with them. And, I had to sort of reason with myself and be like, look, this is okay. Normalize that sort of experience. This doubt is normal. This feeling of fatigue is part of training. You have the ups and downs. It's the same with a learning process when you're trying to learn a new skill or work towards something. It's not linear. You have the ups and downs. Sometimes you have to take 2 steps back and then you go 1 step forward. It's just the way it works sometimes. And just normalizing that self-compassion piece. And we're going to go into that a bit more detail of how we can be a bit more self-compassionate. But that's an example I had over the last few weeks. And I start thinking maybe I'll withdraw from the race. Maybe I'll just do it another time. But then I have to sort of reevaluate my goals are and just set more realistic expectations of things I can sort of work towards. So when it comes with this, when I'm sort of training, I realize it's not just me training my sort of body to do the task. This showing up daily and doing these things and getting to the end and doing these workouts, it's training my mind. Okay, because when I learn, it's training my mind that I can do hard things even when I'm tired. I can show up, and that's important because that bleeds into other areas of your life. It's not always the best. I've had this example recently where I've had to mow the lawn in my garden for the last few weeks. And I've just not wanted to do it whatsoever. My wife is said to me, why don't you just use your go method? Why don't you just use one of your tools? And to be honest, there's a part of it where I'm like, I know. I talk about all this stuff all the time. And it took me and once I got it done, it wasn't that hard. And I was just like, I should have done that ages ago. So even these tools, I realized that, I do use them and there's something I talk about quite a lot. But even then, there's still times when I'm unable to get things done. I can run 100 miles, but I can't mow my own lawn. That's typically the way it works. So what we need to do, so in the second section here, is we need to focus on these sort of systems that we can put in place. Because even though I talk about James Clear and I say, systems, it's not just a systems problem, it's a human problem or a thinking problem. There is thinking systems that you can put in place. Often these are systems that we put in that are behavioral, our environment. We put step-by-step instructions of this is what I'm going to do when this happens. But we need systems about thinking, about how we're going to think in what we're doing, what actions we're going to take when something comes up. So let's talk about the sort of systems that you would have sort of with exercise to make it easy. You want to reduce as much resistance as you can. I think that's the key. And there's a couple of things that you can do. So some of them you can have the social pressure where you can go to group runs and you can message the people before and you're part of a group and there's more likely going to show up together. You can have your gear ready from the night before and just have it all ready and set. So the intention is you've made the decision when you're not 6 a.m, the sun's coming up and be like, should I go for a run? You've already made the decision night before and it makes it a lot easier in the morning that that's what you're going to do. So you can set up your sort of environment to best suit you. Like if you want to do some work, if you want to sit down and actually focus, having your phone in your view is just going to cause a lot of problems. You need to get your phone out of the room. So what I do is I put my phone around the corner in a box or sitting on the shelf and it's all out of my view. I can't use it. It's on silent. But if you want to go to another step, you can block it. So there's some apps called Freedom, which enables you to block your phone. So you just can't use it. You got these bricks as well. You can brick your phone. I haven't got one of those. Thought about it, but these are the sort of things of setting up your system. So that's the physical sort of systems that you can set up. I want to talk some sort of mental cues that you can sort of work up. And I call it map. So how do you map this out? Okay, so first of all, whenever you've got your goal that you're working towards, I call it, this is my map to make things happen, you've got a direction of where you want to go. What's the map that you're going to use to get there? So the M is for minimum dose. And I've talked about this before. I use this in the GO method, but what's the smallest amount that you could possibly do? So when things get difficult, imagine you're supposed to exercise every day or you've got a training program you're working towards. Something is better than nothing. So what's the minimum dose that you can do? If it's writing, maybe it's write a line. If it's painting, maybe you're just going to draw a tiny amount. Do 5 minutes. If it's meditation is your goal, maybe it's just 2 minutes of meditation. That's all you need to do. So think about that. And it stops this all or nothing thinking. So this black and white thinking is all or nothing and this is something I'm very prone for. If I can't do a 3-hour run, I'm just not going to run at all, which is silly. Something is better than nothing. So think about this on bad days. This really helps. So you don't need to aim to be perfect when you're doing this. It just aim for the minimum effective action. So remember, this is the MAP process and this is M. What is the minimum dose that you can do? Then you've got anchor. So this is something you do when you do your planning. So when you're planning this new behavior or this new thinking process or this new response, this is the if-then sort of approach of habit formation or creating a system or whatever you're doing, working towards this sort of goal. So imagine you're meditating. So my meditation, I know every morning my habit is to have a coffee. Okay, so if I have a coffee, then I meditate before it. If I have a coffee, then I meditate before it. And you can do this for other things. So imagine you've got a difficult task. So if you're running and you've got halfway through and you predict that you're going to get really tired and feel like crap. So it would be like, if I'm tired and I feel like crap and I don't want to run or I want to quit, I will slow down and do the best I can. I will finish the distance, but do it slower. I will finish the amount of time and effort, but just do my best, just slow down and just relax and take it easier. So if I'm too tired to do my workout, then I will do an easy workout instead. So workouts are like hard effort. So if I'm doing like 4 times 1 kilometer or 10 times 1 kilometer, which is going to be really hard, my body's fatigued. So if my body's really fatigued or sore, then I'll do an easy workout instead. So rather than just skipping it out entirely, you're doing something easier. So it's the same with writing. If you are feeling mentally blocked and you're unable to come up with new ideas, then you will just write one sentence or rehearsal. If you feel like you can't rehearse or overwhelmed or you don't know how to get started, then you'll say the opening line. So this if-then sort of process is backed by lots of research. There's some interesting studies in this in terms of physical exercise. You know, people that have these sort of systems in place are just like 10 times more likely to actually take action when motivation sort of dies out. So long-term studies, there's a meta-analysis on this over the long-term effectiveness of using a system like this, like an if-then system, is being able to predict hurdles and obstacles that come up. You're more likely to exercise in the future. So if it's raining outside, then you'll do 10 minutes of exercise indoors. You have a 10-minute workout and you plan these 10-minute workouts. So there's just least resistance. You just know that you can get something done. Then the final part of the map. So you've got, remember, so you've got M, which is minimum dose. A is anchor. So you need to anchor that behavior into something. And then P is to sort of prove it. It's about recording it if you can. So prove, what's the proof that you have of this activity? How are you recording proof that you're doing it? Now, tracking is really important. There's so many tools nowadays to track. If you're doing Apple Health, I track a lot of stuff in there. I've got Garmin, Strava. I've got so many things, Training Peaks. But other things as well. So you can have like little habit trackers where you just track how many times you do it. You can have these on your phone. You can do so many different things, but it's just proven that tracking, whether you're trying to lose weight or anything like this, just tracking whatever it is, you're more likely to succeed. You can see the progression over time and you can sort of reflect on where you've actually come from. Like with meditation, sometimes I realized recently, since becoming a father, I've really struggled to get up and meditate in the mornings. And it's affected me. I can feel it. I feel my brain's being pulled in so many different directions. And I have to sort of regroup and be like, I need to get this habit that you've been doing for 10 years. It's something that I know I can do it. And I feel so much better when I do it. So I've started to just start tracking it again. But I can look back and be like, wait a minute, I've meditated thousands of minutes, like hundreds and hundreds of hours. And so the skill is there. I can still use those skills. I am a meditator. I just need to I'm somebody who meditates. I just need to get that habit back. And sometimes in life, events changes. So I'm trying to juggle and trying to regroup and trying to get a bit more of a structure in my life at the minute. But sometimes it's out of balance. My life can sometimes be going really well. And then sometimes I sort of crash out because there's too much going on. I've got too many things and I lose that sort of structure. When I lose that structure, things like all of us, we're just unable to do. But when you're trying to juggle many things, it's sometimes you have to regroup. And I think that's important to sort of recognize, because I think some people think they hear me talk about this stuff and they're like, oh, you just must have, so easy to just structure your life when you work for yourself and things like this. And trust me, it is not. So once we have this system, so you have MAP, that's the ability to sort of track your, once you've got the goals and the direction, this is what you use to sort of work towards it. Now, finally, I want to focus this last bit of the podcast on our thinking when it comes to this, when, stuff goes wrong, when it's hard and it's difficult, or you end up quitting or for whatever reason. And one of the biggest mistakes people do when we're doing hard things is they think they need to be harsh with themselves. They see David Goggins and they're like, don't be a bitch. But the truth is, it's probably the worst thing you can do for yourself. The shame and anxiety and depression and low mood and rumination and all this sort of stuff. Your paralysis that you get, that you're unable to take action. You just feel that you're not good and you're not worthy. And often it's because we attach it to our own identity. And we'll just remember, self-compassion here, it's not about being soft. It's not about being, all cute with yourself. It's not making excuses. It's not pretending things are fine either. A lot of people go, when you feel from a race, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, I'm not bothered. That's not self-compassion. That's delusion. Okay, you're clearly bothered. It's the same when I finish a 100-mile race. I say that I'm able to bounce back and I plan for this. I am very bothered when I've had to withdraw. I'm pretty open to say I've been quite emotional when I've had to quit from my races. It's a really hard experience. But at no point in that, even when they creep in these thoughts and they're like, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, you just wasted all your time, you're just not strong enough or whatever. Once you start saying you're not a good person and stuff like this, you're just useless. Any of those sort of thoughts, I'm able to catch them before they get worse. And I'm able to change them to something that's a lot more useful, a lot more compassionate, that enables me to sort of bounce back and learn and grow and all those sorts of things. So remember, we're going to go into this. I'm going to give you those tools, but self-compassion is not letting yourself off the hook. It's staying on your side when things get hard. Let me repeat that. Self-compassion is not letting yourself off the hook. It's staying on your own side when things get hard. So what is self-compassion? Some people have probably heard it on a Instagram reel, something like this. We hear all this stuff all the time. I've got some notes here. There's 3 parts of being self-compassionate. So talk to yourself like someone worth helping. There's a common humanity. So struggle is being part of being human. It's not proof that you're broken in any way. And then the last part is mindfulness. So notice the pain without becoming completely consumed by it. So let me repeat that. 3 parts to self-compassion. So first of all, self-kindness. Talk to yourself like someone's worth helping, like talk to yourself like a friend. Next part is common humanity. So struggle is being part of being human. This is what we all do. And then mindfulness, notice the pain without becoming completely consumed by it. So a simpler version is this. This is hard. I'm not the only one who is experiencing this. A lot of us are going through hard times. What would help right now? So the goal isn't to baby yourself. The goal is to just stop being your own worst enemy. Stop putting yourself down. I used to do it all the time, especially when I was struggling with addiction and things like this. I was stuck in this shame loop, really hating myself, really hating who I was as a person, really struggled to look at myself in the mirror because I just couldn't keep to my tasks. And this happens to a lot of people with ADHD. And I've been through those moments where you lose something or you make an error, you forget something or you break something and you're like, oh, and you start this attack on yourself where you tell yourself you're not good enough and you can't do this. And this causes so much pain, so much suffering. It doesn't cause you any ability to sort of improve. So it's about taking a pause and realizing that it's okay. Everything's fine and working through that. So I'm going to go in for some sort of steps on how you can work through self-compassion now and why it matters a lot when doing hard things. Because a lot of people think self-criticism keeps them sharp with it. They're like, oh, I'm my own worst critic. I just need to grit. I just need to knuckle down. And, and you use shame in the short term to sort of get you through. And it can work. David Goggins is a good example. But it just causes a lot of anxiety, depression, low mood, and long-term suffering, basically. And it's really important that self-compassion is shown to reduce that. It's the opposite of that. So remember, if you miss a day or you make a mistake or something happens, it's not, I always do this. I'm the type of person who does that. I can't stick to anything. I'm terrible with this. Self-compassion interrupts that spiral. And it's like, it's okay. This happens. People miss habits. We're human. Life gets in the way. I've got this. It's okay. Let's just pick ourselves back up. Let's do it again. It's okay. This is just part of the process. This is part of being human. And it just helps you recover faster. It picks you back up. So the end of 100 mile, when I've dropped out 100 miles, 90 kilometers, I was like, it's okay. This sucks. It's awful. And you've worked really hard on this. This means a lot to you. It's good. It's okay to be upset. Other people are upset. Other people have had to drop out. But you've done really well, and you're going to come back and you're going to do it. You can do this. And that's my thinking. Same with Dragon Back. Day 6, I was like, I've achieved something incredible. I've done 320 kilometers in 5 days under some of the most difficult terrain ever. I've proven to myself I'm capable of doing anything. I don't need to get to the end to prove anything. You're okay. You're healthy. Your body's going to recover. You're doing this for long-term health. You don't need that short-term satisfaction. You're a long-term thinker. You've got this. It sucks. It's okay to be emotional. But you're going to come back, and you're going to come back stronger. You've got this. And it's just about getting that thinking, okay? Because I saw people at Dragon Back who didn't do that. And it was horrible. They were doing it because they were working through their trauma, working through things in their life, which just, and you could see it, their struggle. And the way they got to the end was through pushing through their own pain and their own inner demons. And there was no self-compassion whatsoever. And I saw some of the posts in the WhatsApp group afterwards, and it's very unhealthy. They were coming from a place of dark depression, and it sounded like some suicidal thoughts, some of them. And I know that some of them were, it was difficult to see. And when you get in those environments, some people, that's the way they approach it, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to have to do these hard things to prove to anyone that's because you're good enough. Okay, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. So self-compassion is that key. It's that missing part that can help all of us in every area of our life. So you change that I'm not enough to I'm enough. I'm enough is so important. I've got this. I'm willing to give it a go. I've got this is one of the most important phrases I have. I've got this. I can do this. I can give it a go. I can give it a shot. I'm willing to do the best I can. I'm willing to do the best I can with what I've got. And these sort of phrases are things that can get ingrained into your head. And one way to do this is a good example I had. I can't remember who it was from. It was from a hypnotist that I was listening to. And the I'm enough, they changed some of their passwords to I'm enough. And they would just put that if you want to get a new phrase into your head, you change some of your passwords. So you're constantly entering it every single day, and it becomes part of your thinking. So if you're someone who's really self-critical and you say, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, I would suggest changing your password to this I'm enough, or having something you see every single day. It's just that gentle reminder that I'm enough, I'm enough. And over time, through action, through changing, through thinking, that can become one of your beliefs. And that makes things overall much easier. So self-compassion interrupts that negative spiral that we can get sort of stuck in. It's sort of that interrupt. So one way to sort of do this is through, and this is something I've spoken about previously, it's the catch it, challenge it, change it method. So again, this is a journaling practice, and I tend to sort of do this as in hindsight, or I do this as a sort of preemptive approach to an event that's going to potentially go wrong or difficult times. Because from experience, we sort of know the types of problems that we're going to face. So we know how we've thought about ourselves in these difficult times in the past, when things have got hard. We go, okay, I said this to myself, and then I did this, and then I did that. So think about those sort of things. So think about when something went completely wrong, what was the thinking that you said? I'm not good enough. I always do this. This really all or nothing, this black and white thinking, this is self-critical narrative that we give to ourselves. So you write that down. So you catch these thoughts. I'm not enough. I can't do this. I'm terrible at this or terrible at that. Whatever it is, I always fail. I always mess up. I always forget. Those sort of things. And then you challenge them. Is this really true? Is it 100% of the time? Probably not. Is it really, if you ask some of your friends, who would it be? And then you just sort of challenge it. What's the evidence? Is there any evidence of the opposite? Has there been a moment in your life where you've done the opposite on a consistent basis? Those sort of things. So you've slowly started to change that sort of thought, and then you need to catch it, challenge it, change it. You change it to something that's more useful. Think about what a friend would say in those moments. How would a friend approach this situation? So you can go from like, what is this story I'm telling myself? Is it true sort of thing, to what is a more useful sort of thought or belief? What would a friend tell you to believe? How would you, if you were watching this in a movie and you saw it, what would you be telling the person on the screen to believe? It's not true. Look, you've done so many great things in your life. It's just part of the process, those sort of things. And this is just a journaling practice. You break it down and you do this consistently. So you do it all the time. This will be in this workbook. There'll be a workbook that goes over the catch it, challenge it, change it method after this. It will sort of help you go through this multiple times. And you can do this about your beliefs, your thoughts. Maybe you procrastinate, maybe you struggle to take action on your goals, but you just change it over time, and you have to just become a habit. Spend a couple of minutes just doing this on a regular basis in the mornings, catch it, challenge it, change it. And slowly these beliefs will start losing their power over you. Something like I am not enough. When you have this belief inside of you that you're not good enough and you criticize you a lot, you can't just change it overnight. This is long-term growth of showing up, showing this self-efficacy, this ability to take action and have an influence on your life. We all like to have the feeling of agency, and this is important. This is part of this process. If you want to get out of depression and anxiety, often the easiest thing to do is to help someone just take action on stuff. Just do something. Okay, that's the important thing. Just start taking action and you start feeling like better. Okay, that's the simple tool. It's one of the easiest things you can do for anyone in those situations. And even if you're not clinically diagnosed with depression, this is like anyone else in life who sometimes when things get difficult. So again, we need to normalize the sort of struggle with if things get hard. Okay, so let me just go over this again. Okay. So how do you get self-compassionate? Catch the voice, catch it, challenge it, change it. What you say to yourself. So change it to something that's more usable. But the important thing is normalize the sort of struggle. This is normal. This is part of it. Okay, this is part of the journey. We all do hard things and it's going to suck. So rather than saying something like, what's wrong with me? Ask something like, what's the next useful step? What would someone who's supporting me want me to do right now? What would the 80-year-old version of myself want me to do in this moment? So again, just practice this, just go over this. And what would the 80-year-old version of yourself want you to do right now? Again, this is what I mentioned last week. There's two versions of yourself we want to try and impress. The 80-year-old version and the 8-year-old version. So imagine you're interviewing the 80-year-old version in the future. What would they want you to do right now? When you're struggling, times get hard and you're just doubling down and things have failed, just be like, what would they want me to do? And often they can sort of help. So like I say, this week, what I want you to do to take away, I want you to pick one hard thing that you're trying to do. Okay, so whatever this is, I want you to, whatever goal that you've put down, I want you to define the minimum version. What is the minimum dose? I want you to choose your anchor. So think of these moments in your life where you can work on the behavior. So this is the if-then strategy. So how can you anchor this behavior into your day? So if this happens, and think of the habits you already have or things that you're trying to do, then I would do this. This could be certain times. So if it's 7 a.m., then I run. If it's this, and it's just the if-then strategy, you're more likely to take action on your sort of goals and work towards them. Then pick a way to track it. So prove it. Remember, this is the map philosophy. So set your map. So where's the proof? So how are you tracking it? It can just be a simple X and just trying to do this each day. And then I want you to write down the one self-compassion sentence for bad days. It could be, I've got this. This is hard, but that's okay. I'm willing to give it a go. And this just becomes your motto. I normally just use, I've got this. It's okay, Andy, I've got this. I've done, I can do this. I do hard things. That's what I say to myself when I want to quit. It's okay. I've got this. So There's a lot to take in this week. I know I jumped around a little bit, but I think it's important that people see the highlight reel, getting to the end, running 100 kilometers. And they just assume that things must be easy for me. And trust me, they're not. They have not been easy whatsoever. Anyone who's overcome addiction will tell you that it's the hardest thing that you've ever done. It's way harder than running any ultramarathon. But those skills that I learned to make behavior change and change the person I was and who I am and be the person that I already was. It was already there, but just expressing that version of myself are the same tools that can sort of help anyone. And these wobbles that we all have in all of the areas of our life, it's really important. It's really important that we sort of learn these self-compassion tools, the catch it, challenge it, change it method, which I hope you go through and you work through this sort of process because it can really help. It's a short journaling practice. Even if you do 2 minutes of it in the morning, it can help you. It can have a profound impact on your life. So I think it's important. The messy bit in the middle that I've been discussing about today, this is where most people quit. Okay. But it's also where you can become stronger. This is the part that can define you of who you are. This is where you can build character. So at the beginning, you're already motivated. You've got so much excitement and joy and, working towards a goal is pretty easy. And at the end, you either win or you fail, you're this or that. And it's just a result that people see. But it's this bit in the middle that's the person who you are. The person who shows up every single day. The person who bounces back when things get difficult, when you struggle, when things get hard. This is where you want to focus your attention. We focus so much on either end. This bit doesn't get as much because it doesn't look as sexy. It's sometimes it's sweaty and it's horrible and it's the thoughts that we have and about ourselves. They're not pretty. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope there's some tools that you can sort of take away. Again, there's quite a lot of things that we went over, but the next episode is about what hard things give you in the end. So I've already touched on it over the last 3 episodes. So it's not about what you achieve, but about the person you become in the process. It's about this meaning. It's about striving for excellence. I think that's the person who we become in the end when we do these things, and we continue to do them. We don't just work towards it and then that ends there. This is a long-term process, something we can all work towards. And I thank you again for taking your time to listen to this episode today. It's been overwhelming, the sort of feedback I've been getting from this, and even the number of people who've been listening, especially over the last couple of weeks when I've given you workbooks to sort of download and stuff. It's been great. And my audience is everywhere. I've been getting a lot of listens over in the US, and yeah, really incredible. I've been on a couple of podcasts this week. It's been really exciting. I'm going to be getting some guests on soon. So I'm working towards doing some seasons where I'll do like 5 episodes on a certain topic, and I'll look for 5 different people, and we'll sort of work towards those. This sort of plan that I have, and I'll hopefully be able to question. So I'm going to reach out to some people, and if there's anyone that you think would be interesting to get on, let me know. But thank you again. I will see you this time next week. Workbook will be in the show notes. Reach out if you've got any questions, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.